My family called me selfish for not giving my inheritance. When they found out the truth, "You're being incredibly selfish, Alara. Grandma Rose would be rolling in her grave if she knew you were hoarding all that money while your own family struggles." My sister Jessica's voice cut through the phone like a knife, dripping with the same entitled tone she'd perfected since childhood. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, watching the rain streak down my apartment window in downtown Seattle. "I'm not hoarding anything, Jess. The money comes with conditions that—" "Oh, spare me the drama. You got $1 million and suddenly you think you're better than the rest of us. Mom's been crying for 3 days straight because she can't afford the new roof, and here you are, living it up in your fancy apartment." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of family guilt settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. 3 months had passed since my grandmother's funeral. 3 months since the reading of her will had turned my entire family against me. "My name is Alara Martinez. I'm 29 years old and I work as a trauma nurse at Seattle General Hospital. For the past 5 years, I've been the family scapegoat, the one who escaped to the big city while everyone else stayed in our small hometown of Millbrook, Washington. What they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was that I hadn't escaped anything. I'd been running from a secret so devastating that it had shaped every decision I'd made since I was 18 years old. Alara, are you even listening to me?" Jessica's voice snapped me back to the present. "I'm listening, but you don't understand the situation." "I understand perfectly. You inherited Grandma's house, her savings, everything, and now you're sitting on it like some greedy dragon. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad are about to lose their house. I can barely afford groceries for the kids, and Marcus just lost his job. But sure, Alara, keep your precious money. God forbid you help your own family." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the sound of rain and the echo of accusations I'd heard dozens of times over the past 3 months. My family had been relentless in their campaign to guilt me into sharing Grandma Rose's inheritance. What they didn't know was that the inheritance came with a condition so specific, so personal, that sharing it would mean revealing the very secret I'd spent 11 years protecting. I picked up the legal document from my coffee table, the one I'd read hundreds of times since that day in the lawyer's office. The key paragraph was highlighted in yellow, Grandma Rose's final message to me written in the formal language of legal documents, but somehow still carrying her voice. The sum of $1,200,000 and the property at 412 Mountain View Road shall be transferred to Alara Elena Martinez upon the condition that she uses these funds to establish the Rose Martinez Foundation for sexual assault survivors within 1 year of my death. Alara shall serve as the foundation's director, and the family home shall be converted into a safe house and counseling center. This bequest is made in recognition of Alara's courage in surviving trauma and her dedication to healing others." My hands shook as I set the document down. Even 3 months later, seeing those words in black and white made my chest tight with emotion. Grandma Rose had known. Somehow she'd known about that night when I was 18. The night I'd never told anyone about. The night that had sent me fleeing to Seattle to rebuild myself from the ground up. The trauma had happened during my senior year of high school, at a party I'd been reluctant to attend. My then-boyfriend Tyler, the mayor's son and golden boy of Millbrook, had assaulted me in his parents' basement while my friends partied upstairs. When I'd tried to tell people, I was met with disbelief, victim blaming, and social exile. Tyler's family had influence, money, connections. I was just the scholarship kid whose parents worked at the local factory. The Whisper campaign had been swift and brutal. I was attention-seeking, vindictive, jealous of Tyler's new girlfriend. Even my own family had questioned my story, suggesting I might have misremembered what happened, that maybe I'd had too much to drink, that maybe I was just hurt and confused. "Are you sure you're remembering this right, honey?" my mother had asked, her voice gentle but doubtful. "Tyler's such a nice boy. And his parents are saying some concerning things about your state of mind lately. That conversation had broken something inside me. If my own mother couldn't believe me, who would? I'd stopped talking about it, finished high school in silence, and left for Seattle the day after graduation with nothing but a backpack and $1,000 I'd saved from my part-time job. The years that followed had been about survival and reinvention. I'd worked 3 jobs while putting myself through nursing school, built a career helping other trauma survivors, and slowly pieced together a life that felt safe and meaningful. I'd thought I'd healed, thought I'd moved past the pain of my family's betrayal. But when I'd sat in that lawyer's office 3 months ago, listening to the reading of Grandma Rose's will, I'd realized that healing was more complicated than I'd imagined. Your grandmother came to see me about 6 months before she passed. The lawyer had explained after the other family members had left, their faces dark with resentment over my unexpected inheritance. She said she had some things she needed to tell you, things she'd kept to herself for too long. He'd handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma's familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter that had shattered and healed me simultaneously. My dearest Alara, I know what happened to you that night at the Hendersons' party. I've known for 11 years, and I've regretted my silence every single day since. Mrs. Patterson saw Tyler dragging you to the basement. She told me what she witnessed, but I was a coward. I was afraid of the scandal, afraid of the Hendersons' power in this town, afraid of what it would mean for our family. I failed you when you needed me most, and I've spent every day since watching you suffer alone because of my cowardice. You left Millbrook broken, and I let you go. I watched you build yourself into an extraordinary woman from a distance, too ashamed to reach out, too proud to admit my mistakes. You became a nurse, someone who helps heal others, and I knew that was your way of transforming your pain into purpose. This inheritance is not charity, Alara. It's restitution. It's my attempt to give you the tools to help other young women who might face what you faced. Use this money to make sure no one else has to run away to heal. Make sure they have a place to turn when their own families fail them. I'm sorry I wasn't the grandmother you deserved. I'm sorry I chose protecting our family's reputation over protecting you. I hope this gift can begin to make amends for the years of support you should have had. All my love and deepest regrets, Grandma Rose. I'd cried in that lawyer's office, grieving for the relationship I'd lost and the validation I'd never expected to receive. Grandma Rose had believed me. She'd known the truth all along, and in her final act, she'd chosen to make it right. But explaining this to my family would mean revealing everything I'd worked so hard to put behind me. It would mean admitting that their golden boy Tyler was a predator, that their doubts and dismissal had driven me away, that the reason I'd abandoned them wasn't selfishness but self-preservation. My phone buzzed with another text. This one from my mother. Jessica told me about your conversation. I'm disappointed in you, Alara. This isn't the daughter I raised. Please reconsider helping your family. We need you. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar cocktail of guilt and anger that my family's communications always triggered. They needed me now. But where had they been when I'd needed them? When I'd needed them to believe me, to support me, to choose me over social convenience. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified. My father called, his voice tired and defeated, explaining how the factory layoffs had hit them hard, how they'd fallen behind on the mortgage, how they'd always counted on family to stick together in tough times. I don't understand what's happened to you, Alara, he said. You used to be such a caring girl. Your mother thinks that city life has made you cold, but I keep hoping there's still some of the daughter I remember in there somewhere. Marcus, my older brother, tried a different approach. His wife had just had their 3rd baby, and they were drowning in medical bills and student loans. Look, I get that you want to be independent, he said during one of his calls. But this is family, Alara. Grandma Rose left you that money because she knew you'd take care of all of us. That's what families do. Even my teenage niece Emma, Jessica's daughter, got involved, sending me tearful videos about how they might have to move out of their childhood home, how scared she was about starting high school in a new district where she didn't know anyone. Each message, each call, each guilt trip chipped away at my resolve. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe there was a way to help them and still honor Grandma Rose's wishes. Maybe I could delay the foundation for a year, just long enough to help my family get back on their feet. But every time I wavered, I remembered that night 11 years ago, remembered the isolation and disbelief I'd faced, remembered the choice between my truth and their comfort that my family had made so easily. I was scheduled to meet with architects next week to discuss converting Grandma Rose's house into a counseling center. I'd already started the legal paperwork for the foundation, reached out to other organizations that served assault survivors, begun building a network of support for women who needed what I'd never had. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family was now asking for the same support they'd denied me when I'd needed it most. On Friday evening, as I was preparing for another night shift at the hospital, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I wondered if one of my family members had decided to drive the 3 hours from Millbrook to confront me in person. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, probably in her early 40s, with short brown hair and tired eyes. She was holding an envelope and checking the address on my door against something written on her hand. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you? Are you Alara Martinez?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Yes, who's asking?" "My name is Linda Patterson. My mother was Dorothy Patterson. She lived next door to your grandmother in Millbrook until she passed away last year." The name clicked immediately. Mrs. Patterson had been Grandma Rose's closest neighbor, a quiet woman who'd kept to herself, but had always been kind to me during my childhood visits. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you in Grandma Rose's letter," I said, opening the door wider. "Please come in." Linda stepped into my apartment looking nervous but determined. "I'm sorry to bother you, especially so late in the evening, but my mother left me some things before she died, and I've been trying to work up the courage to contact you ever since I heard about your grandmother's passing." She handed me the envelope she'd been carrying. "Mom wrote this letter years ago, but she was never sure if she should send it. She was there the night something happened to you at a party. She saw what that boy did to you, and she's been carrying the guilt of not speaking up ever since." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Another letter from beyond the grave, another witness to the truth I'd carried alone for so long. "She talked about you often," Linda continued. "She said you were just a kid, and what happened to you wasn't right. She said she should have done something, should have spoken up, but she was scared of the consequences. The Hendersons were powerful people in town, and she was just a widow living on Social Security." I nodded, understanding the fear that had kept both Mrs. Patterson and Grandma Rose silent. Millbrook was a small town where reputation mattered more than truth, where protecting the status quo was more important than protecting victims. "Mom wanted you to know that she never doubted you," Linda said. "She saw what she saw, and she knew you were telling the truth. She hoped that someday she could make it right, but she ran out of time." After Linda left, I sat on my couch and opened Mrs. Patterson's letter with shaking hands. "Dear Alara, you don't know me well, but I've watched you grow up from my kitchen window, and I've carried a secret about you for far too long. I was in my backyard that night of the Henderson party, hanging laundry on the line even though it was getting dark. I saw Tyler Henderson drag you around to the basement entrance. I saw you struggling, trying to get away. I saw him force you inside. I should have called the police right then. I should have banged on that door and demanded he let you go. Instead, I stood frozen in my yard, too shocked and scared to act. By the time I worked up the courage to do something, 20 minutes had passed. I saw you come out of that basement crying and disheveled, and I knew something terrible had happened. I wanted to go to you, to help you, but I was a coward. The Hendersons were important people, and I was nobody. I convinced myself that maybe I'd misunderstood what I saw, that maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. When you tried to tell people what happened, I watched from my window as the town turned against you. I watched you get smaller and quieter every day. I watched your parent struggle with whether to believe their daughter or the respected family that was calling you a liar. I watched you pack your bags and leave town, and I knew it was because no one had stood up for you when you needed it most. I've lived with this guilt for 11 years. I failed you, Alara, and I'm sorry. You deserved better from all of us. You deserved to be believed, to be protected, to be supported. Instead, you were sacrificed to protect a lie that everyone found more comfortable than the truth. I'm writing this letter because I want you to know that someone saw what really happened that night. Someone knows you were telling the truth. I hope that knowledge brings you some peace. And I hope you can forgive an old woman who was too afraid to do the right thing when it mattered most. You've grown into an extraordinary woman despite what happened to you, and I'm proud of you for that. I'm proud that you found the strength to rebuild your life, to help others, to turn your pain into purpose. You're a survivor in the truest sense of the word. If you ever decide to tell your story again, know that there are people who will believe you this time. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, even when we try to bury it. With deep regret and profound respect, Dorothy Patterson. I cried until I had no tears left, mourning for the girl I'd been and grieving for the community that had failed her. But underneath the sadness was something else. Validation. 2 women had seen the truth and had spent years carrying the weight of their silence. Their letters were proof that I hadn't imagined it, hadn't exaggerated it, hadn't deserved it. My phone was buzzing with another call from Jessica, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel the familiar spike of guilt and obligation. Instead, I felt clarity. I declined the call and opened my laptop. It was time to stop carrying my family's expectations and start building the legacy Grandma Rose had envisioned. The foundation's website went live the following Monday. I'd been working on it quietly for weeks, but now I was ready to make it public. The Rose Martinez Foundation for Sexual Assault Survivors would provide counseling, legal support, safe housing, and advocacy for women who had been failed by their communities and families. The homepage featured a photo of Grandma Rose's house and a mission statement I'd written and rewritten dozens of times. Every survivor deserves to be believed. Every survivor deserves support. Every survivor deserves justice. The Rose Martinez Foundation exists to provide what too many survivors never receive: a community that chooses truth over comfort, healing over silence, and survivors over perpetrators. I included a founder's letter section where I told my story in detail for the first time in 11 years. I wrote about the assault, about my family's reaction, about the years of silence and self-doubt, about Grandma Rose's final gift, and Mrs. Patterson's confirmation. I wrote about the choice between protecting my family's feelings and honoring the memory of 2 women who had finally chosen to stand with me. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By the end of the week, I'd received dozens of emails from other survivors, from advocates, from donors who wanted to support the foundation. Several women from Millbrook reached out to share their own stories about Tyler Henderson, stories that had been whispered about for years but never reported. But the message that hit me hardest came from someone unexpected: my niece Emma. "Aunt Laura, I saw your website and read your story. I'm so sorry about what happened to you, and about how our family treated you. I always wondered why you moved away and never visited much. Now I understand, and I'm angry at everyone for making you feel like you had to choose between telling the truth and having a family. I want you to know that I believe you, and I think what you're doing with the foundation is amazing. I'm proud to be your niece, even if the rest of our family doesn't deserve you." Emma's message was followed by one from her best friend, then several of her classmates. Apparently, my 18-year-old niece had shared my story with her peer group, and these young women were responding with the kind of immediate, unquestioning support that their parents' generation had been unable to provide. The generational difference was striking and hopeful. These teenagers didn't question whether I was telling the truth or wonder what I might have done to deserve what happened. They simply believed me and were outraged on my behalf. But not everyone was supportive. The calls from my family had shifted from guilt trips to anger to outright hostility. "How dare you air our family's dirty laundry online?" my mother said during one particularly venomous call. "You've embarrassed us in front of the entire town. People are asking questions, bringing up old rumors. You're destroying our reputation over something that happened 11 years ago." "I'm telling my truth, Mom. The same truth I tried to tell you when I was 18. That's not how I remember it. You were confused, upset. We never said we didn't believe you." The gaslighting was so casual, so automatic, that I almost questioned my own memories for a moment. Almost. "You're right," I said calmly. "You never said you didn't believe me. You just acted like you didn't. You chose Tyler's reputation over my well-being. You chose community peace over your daughter's safety. You chose silence over justice. We did what we thought was best for everyone. We were trying to protect you from more hurt. You were protecting yourselves from inconvenience. There's a difference." The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, but for the first time, I didn't feel devastated by her rejection. I felt free. The foundation work became all-consuming in the best possible way. Converting Grandma Rose's house into a counseling center was more complex than I'd anticipated, but every challenge felt meaningful. I was creating something that would outlast my pain, something that would ensure other women didn't have to face their trauma alone. 3 months into the project, I received a call that changed everything. "Miss Martinez? This is Detective Alara Kim with the Millbrook Police Department. I'm calling about your foundation website and the story you shared about Tyler Henderson." My heart rate immediately spiked. I'd expected pushback from the community, maybe even legal threats, but I hadn't expected law enforcement to get involved. "We've received several reports this week from women who read your story and came forward with their own experiences involving Mr. Henderson. Similar patterns, similar circumstances. We'd like to open a formal investigation, and we're hoping you'd be willing to provide a statement." I was quiet for so long that Detective Kim asked if I was still there. "I'm here," I said finally. It's been 11 years. I never thought anyone would investigate. I know it's been a long time, and I know this might be difficult, but you should know that what you've done, sharing your story publicly, has given several other women the courage to come forward. Sometimes it takes one person being brave enough to break the silence. The investigation that followed was both exhausting and cathartic. Detective Kim was thorough, professional, and most importantly, she believed me from the first moment I walked into the police station. The contrast between her immediate acceptance of my account and my family's years of doubt was stark. 5 other women eventually came forward with similar stories about Tyler Henderson spanning a period of 8 years. The pattern was consistent. He targeted young women who were isolated or vulnerable, often at parties where he could claim consensual encounters later. He used his family's reputation and influence to discredit anyone who tried to speak out. As news of the investigation spread through Millbrook, the town's reaction was predictably divided. Some people were shocked and supportive of the survivors. Others closed ranks around the Henderson family, calling the investigation a witch hunt. and blaming me for stirring up trouble with my attention-seeking website. My family's reaction fell squarely into the second category. "I hope you're happy," Jessica said during what would be our final phone conversation. "You've destroyed Tyler's marriage, his career, his children's lives, all because you couldn't let go of some teenage mistake." "Rape isn't a teenage mistake, Jess, and I'm not responsible for the consequences of his choices. You were drinking that night. You were flirting with him all evening. Everyone saw it. Maybe what happened wasn't what you wanted, but you put yourself in that situation." The victim blaming was so reflexive, so automatic, that I realized my family hadn't changed at all in the 11 years since I'd left Millbrook. They were still the same people who had chosen comfort over truth, reputation over justice. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I can't let go. I can't let go of the fact that my own family abandoned me when I needed them most. I can't let go of the fact that you chose protecting a rapist over protecting your sister. And I can't let go of the fact that even now, even with multiple victims coming forward, you still can't admit that you were wrong." I hung up and blocked all of their numbers. This time, it felt permanent. The trial took place 18 months later. Tyler Henderson was ultimately convicted on 3 counts of sexual assault and sentenced to 12 years in prison. The other cases, including mine, were too old to prosecute successfully, but they were allowed as evidence to establish a pattern of behavior. I testified about my assault and about the years of silence that followed. When Tyler's defense attorney tried to suggest that I was motivated by financial gain from my foundation's publicity, I looked directly at Tyler and said, "I would give up every dollar I inherited to have had a family that believed me when I was 18. But since I can't change the past, I'm using those dollars to make sure other women don't face what I faced alone." The courtroom was packed with survivors, advocates, and community members. My family was notably absent, but Emma was there, sitting in the front row with several of her friends who had driven down from college to support me. After the verdict was read, Tyler's mother approached me in the courthouse hallway. I hadn't spoken to Mrs. Henderson since high school, and I braced myself for anger or recrimination. Instead, she looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what my son did to you, and I'm sorry for the way this town treated you afterward. You were just a child, and you deserved better from all of us." It was the apology I'd never expected to receive, and it meant more than she could have known. The foundation officially opened its doors on the 2nd anniversary of Grandma Rose's death. The renovated house now contained counseling offices, a legal aid clinic, a 24-hour crisis hotline, and temporary housing for women who needed a safe place to stay while rebuilding their lives. At the opening ceremony, I spoke to a crowd of supporters, survivors, and community members who had traveled from across the state to celebrate what we'd built together. This foundation exists because 2 women, my grandmother and her neighbor, finally found the courage to tell the truth, even when it was too late to help me directly, I said. But it also exists because sometimes we have to choose between the family we're born into and the family we create. Sometimes healing means walking away from people who can't or won't support our truth. In the audience, I saw Detective Kim, Linda Patterson, several of the women who had testified alongside me, and Emma, who had driven down from college with her boyfriend specifically for the event. "The greatest gift my grandmother gave me wasn't money," I continued. "It was permission to stop carrying other people's shame and start building something meaningful from my own pain. Today, we're opening our doors to any woman who needs what I needed 11 years ago. Someone to believe her, someone to stand with her, and someone to remind her that her truth matters more than other people's comfort." After the ceremony, as I was locking up the building for the night, Emma approached me alone. "I have something to tell you," she said, and I could hear the nervousness in her voice. "Something happened to me at a party last month. I didn't want to say anything because of everything going on with the trial and the foundation opening. But I kept thinking about your story and how you had to handle it alone. My heart broke for her, but I also felt a fierce pride that she had trusted me enough to share her truth. I'm glad you told me, I said, wrapping her in a hug. And I want you to know that you're not alone. We're going to make sure you get whatever support you need. The thing is, Emma said, pulling back to look at me, I already reported it to the police. I told my parents, I told my friends, and everyone believed me immediately. No one questioned my story or suggested I was making it up, or asked what I was wearing or whether I'd been drinking. She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. I think maybe your story, what you went through and how you survived it, maybe it changed something in our family. Maybe it changed something in our community. Maybe girls like me don't have to face what you faced because you were brave enough to break the silence. That night, I called my grandmother's old house, now the foundation's main building, and listened to the voicemail greeting I'd recorded months earlier. You've reached the Rose Martinez Foundation for Sexual Assault Survivors. If this is an emergency, please hang up and call 911. If you're a survivor who needs support, you've come to the right place. Your story matters. Your truth matters. You are not alone. As I listened to my own voice promising support and belief to women I'd never met, I realized that I'd finally accomplished what I'd set out to do all those years ago when I'd left Millbrook as a broken 18-year-old. I'd built a life that mattered. I'd created a family of choice that valued truth over comfort. I'd transformed my pain into purpose. The inheritance my family had called me selfish for keeping had become something bigger than any of us had imagined. It had become proof that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable the people who hurt you. Sometimes healing means choosing your truth over their comfort. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build yourself, one survivor at a time. 6 months later, I received an unexpected letter forwarded from the Foundation's P.O. box. It was from my mother, written on her familiar stationery with the roses around the border. Ilara, I've been thinking about what you said during our last conversation, about how we chose Tyler's reputation over your well-being. I've been thinking about it every day since the trial ended. You were right. We failed you when you needed us most. We were so worried about what other people would think, so afraid of the gossip and the questions, that we forgot our job was to protect our daughter, not our reputation. I watched the news coverage of your foundation's opening ceremony. I saw the women who came to thank you for giving them a voice. I saw how many lives you've touched by refusing to stay silent. I realized that the daughter I raised, the one who always stood up for what was right even when it was hard, was still there. You'd just learned to stand up for yourself instead of for us. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you became, despite us, not because of us. I'm proud that you found the strength to build something beautiful from something terrible. I know it's too late to be the mother you needed when you were 18, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be the mother you deserve now. All my love and deep regret. Mom. I read the letter 3 times before setting it aside. Maybe someday I'd be ready to rebuild that relationship. Maybe someday I'd be able to forgive the people who had failed me when I was most vulnerable. But for now, I was content with the family I'd built from scratch, the family that chose truth over comfort, healing over silence, and love over fear. And the foundation had already helped over 200 women in its first year of operation. Each success story, each survivor who found her voice, each family that chose to believe their daughter was proof that change was possible, even in places that had seemed hopeless. And sometimes, late at night when I was working in Grandma Rose's old house, I could swear I felt her presence, proud and peaceful, finally able to rest knowing that her silence had been transformed into a legacy of truth-telling that would outlive us all. The money my family had called me selfish for keeping had become something none of us had expected. The foundation for a different kind of family, one built on truth, healing, and the radical act of believing survivors. It had become proof that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable the people who hurt you, and sometimes the most powerful revenge is living well enough to help others do the same.